Hey scientists, slash ecologists. So today we're going to go over food web and energy flow in an ecosystem. Now before I go any further, a little bit of background information. We're going to be talking about kcals. Basically what a kcal is a calorie. So 1,000 calories actually, that whole kilo thing. So anyway, so what a calorie is a basic unit of energy. Okay, so this is going to be all about energy transfer. Calories are units of energy. So if you look on the back of a Snickers bar is 260 calories, whatever. That's 260 units of energy. All right, so energy flow in an ecosystem. It's all going to start at the plants and move on up from there to more complex organisms. So it's going to go from plants. Here I've got some rabbits, some squirrels, mouse. Over on the insect side, we've got herbivorous insects, which are plant-eating insects. We've got predaceous insects, which are insects that eat other insects. And then we get into more complex organisms, such as toads, snakes, hawks and owls, and foxes. All right, so relationships between organisms basically boils down to how energy transfers from one organism to another. There's three main players, three roles in energy transfer. The first is the producer, which is down at the bottom like the plants. The second is the consumer. And the third is the decomposer. Those are sort of the three main players on the stage here. All right, so very bottom, first player on the stage is the producer. It's an organism that makes food from an unusable form of energy. These unusable forms can include sunlight and CO2, so what we breathe out. A consumer, next player on the stage, is the organism that obtains energy from eating other organisms. The four types of consumers are the herbivores, the carnivores, the omnivores, and the scavengers. So the four types of consumers. The first one is the herbivore, and this is a consumer that eats only plants, like our cute little panda friend there. These are a primary consumer. A carnivore is a consumer that eats only animals. And these are secondary and tertiary consumers. So we're going to go more into primary, secondary, and tertiary and what those mean in the next slide. And an omnivore is a consumer that eats both plants and animals. An omnivore can be primary, secondary, or tertiary. Omnivores eat anything. So we human beings are examples of omnivores. Scavengers are carnivores that feed on bodies of dead organisms. They sort of eat the scraps, what's left over. Examples would be like a T-Rex, a vulture, a jackal, or a catfish. And these can be secondary or tertiary consumers. All right, so as promised, more on primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers. So a primary consumer is a consumer that eats only plants. So for example, a panda bear, a cow, or a mouse. So a secondary consumer is a consumer that eats a primary consumer. For instance, a cat. So the cat, which is the secondary consumer, eats the mouse, which is the primary consumer. A secondary consumer is a consumer that eats a primary consumer. A tertiary consumer eats a primary and a secondary consumer. For example, a hawk. So the hawk eats the cat, who ate the mouse. And actually, let me go back on this a little bit more. Let me go through this and I've got a cool example. All right, so here we go. So I've got a pig. All right, so a pig is a primary consumer. Just sort of eats grass, what have you, right? Primary consumer. Now, primary consumers are mainly going to be herbivores. They're going to be vegetarians. So then I've got a lion, all right? So the lion is a secondary consumer. It's a consumer that eats a primary consumer. So the lion is going to eat the pig, right? Okay, So the lion is the secondary consumer because it's eating the primary consumer. All right, let me see if I can juggle all this stuff. All right, here we have a tertiary consumer. So the tertiary consumer, hang on, is can eat the lion, right? Now, the lion ate the pig. Okay, so tertiary consumer eats the secondary consumer that ate the primary consumer. Line them all up in a row here. So we've got primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer. Yeah. All right, let me go put these back. All right. So, lastly is a decomposer. A decomposer is an organism that breaks down wastes and dead organisms. So these are sort of nature's recyclers. For example, bacteria and fungus. So they break down organic matter into smaller bits. So you put all these roles together and you get a chain of energy flow. So the food chain is a series of events when one organism eats another and obtains energy. All right, so as you can see, there's a lot of different directions going on here. Basically, you are going to move up. The more complex organisms will be near the top of the food chain. So here we have a food web, which is a pattern of overlapping food chains in an ecosystem. Now, here we go. This was what I was talking about the calories, about the kcals. Basically, the producers, let's say they produce 1,000 kilocalories, all right? Now, the first level consumers, you'll notice, only can gain from that primary consumer 1,000 kcals. The second level consumer only gets 10 kcals from that. Third level only gets 1 kcal. Now, if you'll remember the guy that was talking about the ecology with the guitar, as you go up, you lose a significant amount of energy gets transferred, or excuse me, the energy is lost as it goes up the chain. So there's only 10% of energy that moves from one level to another. In other words, between each level, you lose 90% at each level. So some reasons for that include metabolic activity. So obviously an owl is going to have a more rapid metabolism than a plant. Okay, so just sort of the cost of doing business. The 90% at each level is lost, and only 10% is actually usable. All right, so let's go over this again. So we've got the grass at the lowest level, which is the producer. Again, let's say it has 1,000 kcals. So then you're going to move up into the primary consumer, which in this case would be an herbivore. For example, is going to be a grasshopper. He's going to get 100 kcals from eating the grass. All right. Now we move on up from there. The secondary consumer, carnivore, in this case a vole, is going to get 10 kcals from eating the grasshopper. Then we move up even higher to the tertiary consumer. Now remember, the tertiary consumer eats the secondary consumer, eats the carnivore, which eats the herbivore, as with my examples, but it looks like my examples lost your pants. Don't look. All right, so now we're moving up from the vole to the hawk, which is a tertiary consumer. It is going to get 1 kcal from eating the vole. So as you can see, as you move up, it is a huge reduction. Only 10% passes, 90% does not make it, cost of doing business. So only 10% of energy as you go up through the pyramid is usable. So in other words, so let's check this out. Where in the pyramid is the most energy concentrated? What do you think, top or bottom? Who has to eat the most to maintain the energy? What is the limiting factor in this period, in this pyramid? I don't know, it could be a lot of limiting factors, huh? What do you think? Ha-ha. So some of the limiting factors are food, water, shelter, and space. So those can constrict. I mean, obviously, you've got a limited amount of food, so if there's only so many voles, there's only going to be so many hawks. If there's only so many grasshoppers, there's only going to be so many voles. Food, water, shelter, and space are limiting factors. All right, and that is about it. Hope you liked our little energy flow. That's just kind of crazy, man. You know, that you only lose, that there's so little that makes it through the pyramid. So hope you dug it, and I will see you next time.